we know what this team is going to look like in spring, from a roster standpoint, from a position group standpoint. So we looked at the offense a couple of weeks ago. Let's concentrate on defense here today. Let's start up front on the defensive line. You lose James Pierce, great pass rusher. We know he's going to be a first-round pick. You lose 3 big bodies there in the interior defensive tackle. You bring back a whole lot at strong side defensive end with Dominic Bailey, and you add a lot to this group. Brent, I'm really intrigued about this defensive line. First, I think it's going to be productive as always. Second, I think it's going to be deep as always. But also, because you lost the Amari Thomases, the Omar Norman Lotts, and so on and so forth inside, where's your help going to come at defensive tackle? Could you take one of these incoming freshmen, that are supposed to be really, really good because you have so many defensive ends, and maybe shift them inside? I'm intrigued to see what this all looks like.
Well, I think you're going to move potentially, however, you're going to see Dominic Bailey slide inside some. I think that's somebody that tends to end up playing inside some to add to that depth.
Yeah, and I think that they're going to look as well at getting back to a little bit more of that Rabbits package of sliding a guy inside like they had with Tyler Barron. I think James Pierce missed Tyler Barron last year. I really do, from a production standpoint. And I understand, that Tyler Barron maybe culturally wasn't the best fit all the time, and this, that, or the other maybe drove some people crazy. But I mean, Tyler Barron's a good football player. Had a really productive year the previous year, and I think it showed. I think that showed up in some of their third down pressure situations. Maybe they liked a little pressure there. So, do they get a little speedier with their defensive front? Do they play more Bailey inside, or do they slide another defensive end inside and play a little more speed rush in there on third down situations? For me, that group is, where's a guy like Nathan Robinson? How much in the rotation can he give you on the inside? Are you not going to be able to play guys 20 snaps a game? Now they got to play 35 snaps a game because you're not as heavy in a rotation as you were a year ago. And then where's a guy like Jordan Ross? Where's a guy like Caleb Herring? Where are they at in taking their next step in their development? Where's who else? Where's Tyree Weathersby? What does he look like? Where is he a further year removed from that hip? I think this is a big spring for Tyree Weathersby. I think he can make a much better name for himself this spring than he could at any point in time last year.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because there are 2 names that I'm super intrigued about, Austin, is one, Brent just mentioned, Tyree Weathersby, who Gardner loved, who thought he was going to get a little PT in 2023 before the injury there in fall camp. And then last year he was kind of a forgotten guy. And then a guy that redshirted this past year, but it feels like the staff really likes him and obviously needs a big spring, is Carson Gentle. But again, you have that position group that is so log jammed. It's like, well, how much of a role can you have? And I don't know. I'm intrigued to see what those 2 guys look like, because obviously the first 2 guys at that position, Dom, and then of course Tyree West.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there are some unknowns there. What's Jamal Wallace look like? Having redshirted this past year, Marion Dye, Isaiah Campbell. Can either one of those 2 true freshmen give you something? And I think it helps that they're here for spring. And so, Weathersby's the one though that you point out that probably does need the kind of spotlight drawn on, because he was the one that Rodney Garner was loving up pretty good, and they thought was going to be able to help them on the field in 2023. And then he had to have the hip procedure, and that, shelved him. And then when he got back, he looked around and goes, man, there's a lot of people in this room. They're all ahead of me on the depth chart, and it's hard to get past them. So, what does he look like, this spring? I think that his attitude, Hubbard, probably is one of excitement, because, the log jam in front of him is no longer the log jam in front of him.
Well, yeah, because some guys left, some guys graduated. I think he sees an opportunity that he did not feel like he had this past fall because of the depth there. And so, yeah, this is a critical month. This is a critical spring for him. I'm just curious to see, Rob, do they get back to playing 2 Leos on the field, 2 straight speed rush guys on the field on third down? Do they play that? Do they play that differently than they did this past year? When they were playing a little more traditional up front, a little less game, more twist and stunts, a little less linebacker blitzes here and there. Do they get a little more aggressive and get a little faster up front with their defensive line in third down situations?
I mean, you think that was more? I mean, you think that was personnel related or philosophy related?
I think there was such a belief that defensive line was so elite that they just kind of rolled their four out there, and
because I think they were fine with Pierce and Josephs out there together, so I don't think it was a personnel issue. I agree with you. Yeah,
and I think it was just a little bit more of, Omar Norman Lott can compress the pocket a little bit, and they did. I mean, they just didn't do it as much the back half or down the stretch of the season as I think a lot of people thought that they would.
I know, but sitting next to him in the press box, nobody gets as excited about the Rabbits package as Eric Kane. Nobody.
Rabbits, Rabbits.
Third and long, Rabbits.
He's like Elmer Fudd looking through the binoculars. He goes, Rabbits.
I mean, I'd say that facetiously. I like it too, but I think it's a good move. But I think with the personnel Tennessee's had, the last few years, it's been productive. I think that's kind of borne itself out.
You look at over at the Leo position briefly before we go to linebacker. Of course, Joshua Josephs, non-TFLs last year, playing behind James Pierce. He's going to have a fine season. Caleb Herring is continuing to take a step. Can Herring stay on sides? And Jordan Ross has got to step up. And Jordan Ross can have a decent little piece of the pie here next year, can he?
He can. I think here's the interesting thing for Joshua Joseph.
You like that?
Is how does Joshua Joseph handle spotlight? He was kind of Robin last year, right? He was.
Do you think he ever got double teamed?
No.
When he was opposite Pierce. I mean,
right.
I'm sure
Never.
Maybe he did.
So how does he handle being the guy? Does he build? I think from a maturity standpoint, Joshua Joseph was at a much, much different place last year than he was the year before. And he admitted that he was, he got caught up in, with James getting all the accolades and some of that stuff. I think he recommitted to the game this past offseason, and it showed up in his game. Can he build off that the way he needs to this offseason to be what we all think he could be? Remember, I mean, as a freshman, he was further along than James Pierce. Mm-hmm. He played more snaps than Pierce did as a freshman. Then the script got flipped in their sophomore year. And then obviously Joshua came back with a really nice junior year. So let's see where he's at. I mean, I think that he's got a chance to have a really nice year for Tennessee and be really effective and using him some different ways. I think the question is, as you mentioned, it's Herring, his growth and development, and then where is Jordan Ross? And then AP, where's Marion Dye? Because that is a freshman. That's a position that a freshman can, in certain situations, can make an impact, as we saw with Joseph's his freshman year. So what can Marion Dye do to help Tennessee off the edge as well?
Yeah, and Marion's a bigger kid. To me, he just feels more like the Tyler Barron body, a guy that can play the edge, but also can, slide in there and go up against some bigger offensive linemen and it not affect him too much.
So would Gass be that guy then?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, right now they have him listed as a defensive lineman, even though I think that was by mistake. And, he'll start out the spring at, kind of that Leo spot. So, I mean, yeah, I think there's multiple guys. But, I mean, Gass can play it. I'm just saying Gass, from a body type standpoint, seems more – or not Gass, Dye, from a body type standpoint, seems more like Tyler Barron than he does Josh Josephs.
Yeah, that makes sense. You look at linebacker. It's got to take a step, obviously, and it missed Keenan Peely the last two seasons for sure. Aaron Carter, Jeremiah Thielander, you lost Caleb Perry, lost Jalen Smith. You're bringing back Edwin Spellman, who's got to take a step. He would have been in the rotation all year long if healthy. You got to make up for lost time there. We'll see what they have in Jordan Burns this spring. Some of those freshmen, AP, they're going to have to play. I think Jaden Harmon's going to be in that rotation this year, and I think he's a guy that they're excited about. I mean, you got some veterans there at the spot who've played a lot of football, but also you're going to have to bring along some of these young guys as well because you lost some of that depth in Perry and Smith and so on and so forth.
Yeah, to back to my point, Marion Dye, when he weighed in without any offseason, 257. Like Josh Joseph's never sniffed 257. And James Pierce really never got that big either. So, but yeah, to the linebackers, they're going to have to rely on, Jaden Harmon, Jaden Perlotti. They're going to have to rely on, growth from Thielander, Growth from Edwin Spillman. Next week's Volquest Confidential is with Ethan Davis. And I asked Ethan Davis, I said, who's one person that's caught your eye that fans maybe haven't seen a whole lot of that you think is going to, really go boom this coming season? And without hesitation, he said Edwin Spillman, and talked about the work he's put in, just how he grinds, how physically gifted he is, all those things. So they need him to take a huge step this spring, to go along with Arion Carter. So, there are some pieces there. There's, maybe not veteran pieces, but there are some talented pieces at linebacker that I think, should have William Inge, should have Tim Banks, and should have fans excited.
Well, and that's a position that they have shown the willingness to play young guys in critical situations. So, I mean, you're not asking them to say, when you come back and say, they got to play a freshman or they got to play some young guys. That's not land. That's not saying will Tennessee's offensive line have their first ever high school player, right? I mean, that's not what you're saying because they've played those young guys, right? I mean, they have. I mean, Spillman was on the field against Vanderbilt, having basically not practiced for 2 months, very little practicing, and they've got him out there, and the game's still in doubt at that point. So I think they're comfortable playing young guys there. All those young guys are going to get more reps than they could ever imagine getting because Arion Carter's not going to do much of anything, if anything at all, this spring. And so it's going to be all these young guys getting tons of work and tons of opportunity with William Inge, which is a real, it's going to be a real positive for building the depth that you're talking about, Eric, that's going to feature young people. I mean, it's going to be freshmen in the 2 deep. There's not any way to avoid that part of it. And so how far along can they come in 15 practices? And what do they learn this month? This month is a critical month of learning because the coaches can get in the film room and get so much time with them. This is a critical month of classroom work in terms of learning scheme. And for William Inge, we all know that he loves that. He loves that room. He loves doing it that way. So we'll see how far along those freshmen come.
And then finally, you look at the secondary. I think depth everywhere, of course, but specifically at cornerback, Jermont McCoy's out right now with an ACL. You have McMurray that's going to step up, and he and Gibson are your corners. But you're looking for some good depth there because you're already kind of thin there to begin with. I mean, Murray backed up both spots, but you wanted to create some more depth there anyway. I think that's a storyline this spring. Boo's there at star, and then at safety, you return your safeties outside of Will Brooks. But you need some more playmaking ability there, and maybe Idris Farouk is a guy that can add that. And I'm intrigued to watch what Farouk does this spring and see if he can kind of get in that 4-man rotation. How much of a slice of the action that he can get moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, with Idris, they obviously trusted him enough to have him out there in critical points at the end of last year. Which I think was a shock to many of us, just because he hadn't played a ton up to that point. But this is somebody that obviously has shown a propensity to be a big hitter. What does Thomas look like at safety? After playing some this year, but not a ton.
Jacoby Thomas.
Yeah, Jacoby Thomas. Sorry, yeah, not Jordan. And then we'll see what happens elsewhere. But I mean, they've got to figure some things out at safety. I don't worry near as much about corner per se as I do just kind of where they are at safety, what the rotation's going to look like at safety. And all that. Now, again,
is Jordan Thomas going to look there at all if it's unsettled? I mean,
I just think he's a ways away from playing. I mean that injury he had, Brent, was a little bit more severe than most people realize, and so I'm not sure he'll be a factor this spring. We'll see about August.
Yeah, I think for me, Rob, when you look at this secondary in general, it's all about creating depth. I think you feel pretty comfortable with 5.
I mean, compared to years past, the top. I mean, yeah. I mean, you got some top shelf SEC guys in your starting lineup.
But the question is, who's your third corner in spring with McCoy out? And listen, the hope is that he's back at the start of the year, but we don't know when he's going to be back. So who's your third corner? Who becomes your fourth corner? What do you look like from a depth at safety standpoint? I think, I think we all believe Christian Charles and Andre Turrentine will probably be the 2 starting safeties at the start of the year because of their experience and where they are. But how much does Farouk come on? Where's John Slaughter? How do they play Aaron Beasley in the secondary? Do they cross train him at multiple positions? And then I think the biggest question mark, Rob, is who's the other nickel? Because look, there's all this talk about playing Boo on offense, right?
Yeah,
Who's going to be the other star? Who's going to be the second star, the rotational star position player? I think is the big question that to me, arguably, maybe the biggest question to answer this spring.
Yeah, and you felt good about the star spot, not only with Boo, but with Christian Harrison last year. I mean, as the season went along, he got better and better and played some good football for you. Of course, he's not here anymore. So, who's going to be that other star player? Is it going to be a true freshman coming in? We'll have to find out. A lot of questions. We'll see how many of those get answered in spring. Of course, Tennessee working out right now and getting ready for spring practice coming up in a little over a month, the next couple of weeks.